Today we will focus on the use of facial recognition technology and biometric data collection in business and residences in New York City. The hearing will also focus on the following three bills. Intro 1170, sponsored by Councilmember Torres, would require businesses to notify customers of the use of biometric identifying technology. Intro 1672, sponsored by Councilmember Richards, would require real property owners to submit registration statements regarding biometric recognition technology utilized on the premises. Preconsidered intro, the numbers pending, sponsored by Councilmember Lander, would define the term key in the New York City Building Code and require building owners to provide keys to residential tenants. New York City has seen an increased use of facial recognition technology in residential buildings and businesses. This game-changing technology has the ability to improve security, yet affects privacy. Unlike other biometric identifiers like fingerprints, facial recognition technology can operate at a distance and without anyone's knowledge or consent. In New York City, cameras are everywhere, as we know, in retail stores, restaurants, on street corners, attached to buildings or vehicles, and more. In the private sector, facial recognition technology can identify customers, prevent shoplifting, and strengthen security, among others. However, there is a little or no knowledge of how data generated from facial recognition technology is collected, stored, and shared.
New York City's customers have honest, transparent, and fair transactions with retailers and establishments. Developments in facial recognition and other biometric technology pose new consumer protection challenges in an atmosphere where there's already growing concerns privacy and personal data. While this technology has the potential to be utilized in a number of positive ways, there are several valid concerns that need to be addressed. For example, at the moment, businesses are not required to inform customers that their biometric information, such as a face or fingerprint scan, is being collected by the store or establishment they are in. Customers are also left in the dark about what happens to this information once the customer finalizes their transaction. As is highlighted in the committee report, facial recognition technology is a highly imperfect and tends to misidentify people of color at very high rates. Just last week, we heard that in Atlanta, Google was hiring contractors to deliberately target people of color, encouraging them to scan their faces in exchange for a $5 gift card so that they can improve its new Pixel device. According to the New York Daily News reporting of this practice, the contractors were told to go after people of color, conceal the fact that people's faces were being recorded, and even lie to maximize their data collections. It was even suggested that the contractors described their face scan as a kind of selfie game, similar to Snapchat. These kinds of deceptive practices are simply not acceptable. We certainly do not want to stand in the way of technological advancement, but we do want to ensure that consumers are fully aware of how their information is being gathered and used.
My name is Sarah Mallory, and I am the Executive Director of Government Affairs with the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development.
How many buildings have keyless entry technologies? Do you know? Are you keeping track of that in the city?
Sure, so I'm with HPD, the Department of Buildings isn't here today, but on my behalf, we don't currently track this. All are required to have a key lock set, so we make sure that we give violations in any instance where we see that somebody does not have a mechanical key in place.
And what about in a power outage? Does the keyless entry work?
During a power outage, somebody could be locked in their apartment or out of their apartment, or that it could not be locked at all, so we have strong security concerns with that in mind. Having a mechanical key option is necessary until any bugs or details can be worked out of those keyless entry systems.
My name is Albert Kahn. I serve as the Executive Director for the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, or STOP, at the Urban Justice Center. If other cities around this country can ban facial recognition, if they can take a stance against a biometric dragnet, if they can have bills that go far further than what we are considering here today, then there is absolutely no reason why the city of New York cannot take these first steps and have these modest requirements simply to let New Yorkers know when they're subjected to biometric surveillance. Many New Yorkers have no idea that simply commuting to the office, their face is constantly being recorded, fed into databases, analyzed, scrutinized, recorded indefinitely to be used by who knows who for whatever purpose they want, and they have absolutely no right to stop it.
My name is Vanessa Bergonzoli. The owner, via management, asked for invasive information, including a photograph of myself, as well as the names, permanent addresses, and photographs of people in connection with my unit who would be receiving an additional fob to enter the building. I do not see why I should have to supply third-party private information to my landlord in order to gain access to the building for those who need to enter my home. That is a violation of their privacy. Why should landlords have access to this level of data on tenants, especially under the guise of collecting such information to improve security, when in reality the same technology may also be used as a tool to monitor and potentially harass tenants?
I want to just mention, just at Knickerbocker, you said that the facial recognition didn't work many times, or it's just once it didn't work, or have you also heard complaints from the other tenants about it not working, the facial recognition?
Both. Like, you know, it hasn't worked for me sometimes. Actually, it didn't work for me at, you know, the entrance gate on Saturday, and the security guard just buzzed me in.
So what happens? How long are you delayed?
I mean, if it doesn't work, then it just doesn't work. You're just standing there, like, you know, dancing in front of the cameras.
Do you consider what the landlord's doing, you know, with his facial recognition or key fob as a form of tenant harassment?
At STOP, we're quite concerned about how biometric surveillance empowers landlords to harass tenants, not merely by tracking every single action they take near the building or in building hallways, but there's emerging forms of artificial intelligence software called gate detection and other products that try to predict what our mood is. What, you know, they try to say, is someone happy? Are they sad? Are they depressed? And that's another level of intrusive surveillance that landlords will be able to deploy unless we stop it here and now. And you can easily imagine the situation in which landlords try to predict who's going to be a, quote, good tenant based off of these sorts of highly invasive forms of AI and trying to micromanage every part of our activity. And we've already heard horror stories of people receiving fines and warnings for their activities in their own buildings because of these systems.
Are you in favor of a categorical ban on facial recognition technology, both public sector and private sector use? Is that your position?
Yes, that is our position. The reason why is, according to MIT and Stanford researchers, when they looked at all the commercially available facial recognition products last year, they found that for someone like me, they're pretty accurate under the right circumstances. But for black women, they were wrong 1 in 3 times. 1 in 3 times. And when you have that sort of performance gap, you are baking in the sort of bias and discrimination we've seen for so many decades.
My name is Laura Hecht-Falella, and I am a legal fellow with the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. This is especially concerning because, as the Council has heard this morning, tools like facial recognition are significantly less reliable when it comes to identifying communities of color, but oftentimes this is exactly where the technology is being utilized. One step forward in addressing these concerns is the POST Act, which required the NYPD to disclose basic information about the surveillance tools it uses and the safeguards in place to protect the privacy and civil liberties of New Yorkers.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you so much for your testimonies and hearings adjourned.
Good morning. My name is Councilmember Debbie Rose, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Youth Services. And today we are conducting an oversight hearing on youth employment opportunities and programming. In addition to oversight, we will be hearing Intro 1474, which is sponsored by Councilmember Richie Torres, which would establish a universal youth employment program. Youth employment is an extremely important issue, not just in New York City, but within our nation. Youth employment has also been shown to have a profound societal impact, such as the reduction of crime and overall betterment of communities. Youth employment should not just be a program, it should be a right. As you know, the Department of Youth and Community Development, DYCD, is the city's lead agency in facilitating workforce development programs and employment opportunities for youth aged 14 to 24. The council has ardently fought for SYEP slots in the past budgets, and we know that the system is not always perfect. However, we work together to ensure that youth have the opportunities that they deserve, so the city as a whole can move forward towards a more positive future.
I am Andre White, Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Connect, and I'm joined by Assistant Commissioner Daphne Montanez.
That you're taking steps to try to figure out how to address undocumented youth in terms of programming for them,
Right.
job
we're
opportunities.
correct. We're looking at the law and see exactly what can be done, if at all anything.
Which of these sectors has the most participants and which has the least?
So right now, daycare, day camp, we have as much as 16,000 young people placed in those sites. And the least is manufacturing. We only have 68 young people placed in that particular sector.
Are we providing them with the opportunities for tech jobs?
We do. I will say that's a field that's a little bit difficult to penetrate. What we do recognize with a lot of the tech companies, there's a lot of interns that are willing to take a volunteer and not paid experiences with them. And a lot of them are smaller startups, right? And unfortunately, they just don't have the capacity and the staff to supervise these young people. So that's a field that's been really quite difficult for us to develop. But what we have done on the project-based learning side for younger youth is to make sure that there's a lot of technology that's infused into the projects that young people are working on.
My name is Lazar Treschan. I'm the Vice President for Policy at Here to Here, which is a new Bronx-based intermediary designed to connect young people to rewarding careers through really an effort to expand work-based learning and career pathways in both our high schools and public universities here in New York. Summer youth employment is the greatest untapped resource in New York City to bridge the equity gap that young people see both in our high schools and colleges. After spending 12 years at the Community Service Society, a lot of my work was on school segregation and integration. And the research I did really showed that the differences between young people, as we know, aren't that any young people aren't smarter than the other, don't have more motivation than the other, but really when they step onto a high school and into college, they just have different resources behind them. And classrooms and teachers can do a lot to support that, but there's so much that happens outside the classroom. And especially in this world, we know it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And in my interviews with young people, and even if you just look at college application essays, you're never writing about what happens in math or science class. You're writing about an internship, a work experience, community service, a trip you took. And the material that different young people from different backgrounds have to put in that college essay, and that college essay is a reflection of what they know about themselves and what they know about the world. And we are really creating an unfair world where some young people are able to have that knowledge of self, what their skills, passions, and interests are, and have that knowledge of what the outer world is, and how do I make that connection between who I am, what my passions are, and what I want to be, and how I can contribute to this world.
Every time we have a conversation, I have a conversation, Council has a conversation with DYCD about expanding programs or a universal program. Other than the money issue, they always talk about capacity. Do you think that the providers have the capacity to absorb, the numbers that we're asking them to serve in terms of universality of summer programs?
DYCD is a rational actor who is a contract agency. They're not providing the services themselves. They are putting out contracts, and putting out more contracts is more difficult. And they, I don't think, benefit from being on the other side of being actually in the program, seeing all the young people's faces who they work with. So I think by nature of having an administrative agency, the capacity challenges will be elevated because they are the ones bearing the burden for the administration of it, yet don't get to, as my wife who works in young programs say, drink from that fountain every day of the young people and seeing them succeed. So I think that is an issue.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
My name is Carlos Menchaca. I'm the chair of New York City Council's Committee on Immigration. This is a joint committee hearing with mental health, disabilities, and addiction. More than half of all New Yorkers are either foreign-born or children of immigrants. 1 million New Yorkers live in households with at least one undocumented individual, and just over a quarter of these New Yorkers are U.S. citizens. It will not come as a surprise to you that we live in a scary time, full of toxic stress, especially if you are foreign-born. Xenophobia was a key component of Trump's presidential campaign and remains the guiding principle for all anti-immigrant actions we have seen from this White House. We also sadly live in a time where members of our own federal government, including our president, continue to make hateful and xenophobic statements. Imagine living in a country as an immigrant where your president equates immigrants with drugs, with crime and disease. Imagine living in a country as an immigrant when your president refers to immigrants as filth or as an infestation. Uncertainty about the future and ever-present threat of deportation are an unimaginable strain on our families.
My name is Nick Gulota, and I'm the Director of Outreach and Organizing for the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I'm joined today by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, New York City Health and Hospitals, and the Mayor's Office of Thrive NYC. This city is committed to a vision of a mental health system that works for everyone. Healthcare, including the mental health care services, is a right and should be available regardless of immigration status or ability to pay. This fundamental belief guides what Moya and our partners do every day to connect immigrants and New Yorkers more generally to mental health services. These services are desperately needed. At a starting point, immigrants face unique stressors from their migration that can increase their risk of psychological harm. And all New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status, face strains on mental health and may need to access mental health services. Add to this the heightened anti-immigrant actions and rhetoric of this federal administration, and it is no surprise that we have heard from our immigrant communities that they experience toxic stress and live in an atmosphere of fear. We know that immigrants face various barriers when it comes to accessing mental health services. These barriers include stigma, lack of insurance, language barriers, and more. These barriers are barriers that have existed before the Trump administration, but the Trump administration's policies have exacerbated the barriers to access and created additional mental health needs. Unsurprisingly, studies show that hostile immigration policies, including increased and indiscriminate immigration enforcement, harm the mental health of immigrants and can exacerbate existing stress and mental health conditions. This federal administration has demonstrated a clear disregard for how its actions affect the health of immigrant families. Instead, it has implemented a series of policies that directly and indirectly harm immigrants' mental health. As just one example, despite the obvious and long-term harm of separating children from their families, the Trump administration has implemented a family separation policy at the border while being unequipped to address the mental health consequences of this separation. As another example, the Trump administration has sought to kill the Affordable Care Act, despite the clear benefits that this law had on increasing insurance coverage and accessing health care in New York City and across the U.S. This situation has contributed to tremendous strain experienced by our immigrant community to ensure mental health for all New Yorkers. All patients are welcome at New York City Health and Hospitals, regardless of immigration status or ability to pay.
I am Dr. Mila Harrison, Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Mental Health at the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. In New York City, we find that while overall rates of serious mental illness are similar for foreign-born and U.S.-born New Yorkers, fewer foreign-born individuals with serious mental illness receive mental health treatment than U.S.-born individuals. In addition, while most age groups of U.S.-born New Yorkers report higher rates of depression than foreign-born New Yorkers, this is not the case for seniors. The prevalence of depression is twice as high among foreign-born adults 65 and older than U.S.-born New Yorkers.
Has DOH-MH produced guidance on best practices around cultural sensitivity for discussing mental health with different foreign-born populations?
The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is really responsible for the mental health service system and is available to all immigrants regardless of their language spoken or their ability to pay or their immigration status.
We're now adjourned.
Councilmember Margaret Chin, Chair of the Committee on Aging. Age discrimination often occurs during the hiring stage, which is very difficult for victims to prove. They may also be due to the fact that many older adults are simply unaware of their rights or who to turn to in order to file a complaint. At last year's hearing, the committees learned that the Department for the Aging, or DFTA, and CCHR engage in a number of programming to increase awareness of age discrimination in the workplace, including providing frequent Know Your Rights information at community-based organizations and senior centers. Despite the administration's effort citywide, seniors are enduring age discrimination in the workforce, and many of them are still not reporting these injustices. We cannot allow the current trends to continue.
I am 44 years old. I am a reporter and anchor at New York One. For nearly 20 years, more than half of them at New York One, I've covered issues revolving around or stemming from the work of this City Council. Starting in the fall of 2017, a movement took hold in this country. Women started coming forward with allegations of sexual misconduct against numerous powerful and seemingly untouchable men. These courageous women helped give others the strength to come forward, who, in turn, gave even more women the courage to speak out. Of course, I am talking about the Me Too movement, which has been life-changing to women here and around the world. During the same time period, I began experiencing blatant age and gender discrimination at New York One. I soon realized I was not alone. However, after Charter took over New York One from Time Warner Cable in 2016, we became marginalized in every imaginable way. New primetime anchoring positions were created and given exclusively to younger women and men. Prime anchoring slots, which had previously been ours, were also given to younger women and men. Promotional efforts were focused entirely on younger women and men. We made numerous complaints to management about this conduct and were all repeatedly told, essentially, to stop complaining. It is no secret that TV news has long disfavored older women, but we perhaps naively felt it wouldn't happen to us. I, Amanda, and my fellow colleagues naively thought things would change by the time we approached middle age. But men are still allowed to age with dignity and grace. Gray hair and wrinkles give them more gravitas, while it makes us more disposable.
My name is Amanda Farinacci. I am also a reporter and fill-in anchor sometimes at New York One. I am 40 years old. I can tell you that in 19 years of work at New York One, I have covered literally dozens of these hearings, standing right over there on the other side of this room. I never, ever in my wildest dreams imagined that I would be any place else in this room besides on that riser reporting on the issues. And obviously, because of the urgency and the weight and importance of this issue is the reason why I'm now part of this testimony. Clearly, this issue at its core is a women's rights issue because it especially affects women. The problem, really, if you dumb it down, is that nobody gets younger, but we all get older. Those 20-year-old women who are replacing me on air today will one day be me. They'll be 40, and they will be thrust aside in favor of men and women younger than themselves if we don't take a stand and highlight this issue now.
I am Dana Sussman, Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs at the New York City Commission on Human Rights.
My name is Sapna Raj, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Law Enforcement Bureau at the Commission on Human Rights.
How many age discrimination claims has the Commission received in 2018 from year to date?
In fiscal year 2019, we had 68 claims that involved age discrimination that we conciliated or settled.
Is there a definition of senior? Do we have that? Sure. Senior Forum DIFTA's perspective on a variety of our programs is 60 and older. There are a whole number of programs, including those we described today, where it's 55 and older.
Karen Kakase, Director of the Employment Law Unit at the Legal Aid Society. The Employment Law Unit represents low-wage workers throughout New York City with most types of employment claims, including discrimination claims and including age discrimination claims. New York City human rights law is very broad in its protections. As it was discussed, it has 26 categories, but it does not cover anyone who works at a small employer. You need 4 employees to be covered by the New York City human rights law, and that is a problem because there are lots of workers out there, many of them older workers, who work at a place where there are less than 4 employees. So we would encourage the City Council to focus on that issue, and all that needs to be done is to eliminate the number 4 in the definition of an employer. An employer should be defined as somebody who has workers working for them, not somebody who has 4 or more employees working for them.
Hi, my name is Lila Malamud, and I'm here today on behalf of the New York Legal Assistance Group. I'm a paralegal with the Employment Law Project. NYLAG is a nonprofit organization that provides free legal services to low-income New Yorkers who can't afford private attorneys, and our Employment Law Project does a variety of types of cases, the majority of which are discrimination, and a lot of them are age discrimination cases.
Is there anyone else that want to testify? If not, I want to thank everyone for being here today, and the hearing is adjourned.